I wanted to do a video of something that I was super inspired to do. I've had some recent changes in my life and I actually switched jobs, and not because I didn't like my previous job. Actually, I'm still at my previous job. I'm just working kind of every now and then PRN, and I love my job, but it's super important to realize that sometimes there are some circumstances that you do love your job but it's just not working out because of those reasons. So kind of setting those aside, but this is a video more for things that internally you're just not growing in your job, you're not happy, and how to recognize those signs and symptoms. It's made me think a lot about different jobs that I've been at over the years that I didn't love, and that maybe I pushed myself to stay there longer than maybe I really should have. I think there's some people that do suppress their feelings and then don't take care of or do interventions to help address the fact that, hey, something's going on internally with us, maybe we're not happy with our job. And especially in the healthcare field, we are so great at looking at other people's signs and symptoms, but a lot of times we don't look at our own. And then what we do, and I'll give you an example of that, when you go a 12-hour shift and you don't go pee the whole shift, but you're worried about the guy in 253 that hasn't peed in 4 hours. If you're ignoring the signs and symptoms of unhappiness at your job, that can lead to a plethora of different issues like poor productivity, missed work days, depression, home life issues, declining physical health, and so much more. So let's jump right into some of the signs and symptoms that may indicate that you need a job change. If you can remember back to when you first started your job, you're asking a lot of questions. You're wanting that knowledge because you want to do it right. You want to follow the policies, the procedures. Some people may argue with this and say, oh, that doesn't mean that you want to change your job just because you're not asking questions. But think about it this way. So if you're not asking questions, we're in a healthcare field, which is changing every day. It's evolving. And so there's new policies, new procedures, new ways to do things. There's new people coming in, coming out. We're constantly learning, and we just never stop learning. And so with that should be question asking. And even if that means it's something as simple as clarifying a policy, when you start noticing that you're not caring about that and you're not asking the questions, you're not looking up research, that could be a sign that you might be ready for a change. Number 2, doing sloppier work. A lot of times what happens is that workers, when they get towards kind of where they're getting ready to like move on to the next job, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll start kind of letting things go that maybe they wouldn't have normally let go. You know, when you first come in, you're all bright-eyed and cheery, jazz hands and all that, whatever. So you're all happy and refreshed and like ready to go and ready to do this and ready to take on the whole unit and take 50 patients and chart for 40 hours and all this stuff. So, but what happens over time when you kind of take on too much and you're not being rewarded for that or recognized for that, then a lot of times you can get burnt out. And so if you're seeing someone else that's doing a crappy job or a subpar job and you feel like you're getting treated just the same way that they are, a lot of times you'll start seeing employees who excel kind of come down to that subpar level when they're not being recognized or rewarded. And so a lot of times that's a good time to speak up, but a lot of times too it's time to recognize in yourself that maybe it's time to start looking for something different, maybe something that's more bonus based or somewhere where you can feel like you can start a contract over or kind of put those stipulations out there. And so it's important to recognize, is this something that maybe you need to pull back on? Is this something that you're being expected to do so much that you can't keep up and that you're not even being recognized for? So that's super important to recognize that. Is all too often that nurses don't say anything because they're either afraid that there'll be some kind of repercussion or that they'll be treated differently. And so, you know, it's better to ask a lot of times than not to ask. But if you're getting to that point where you're feeling like you just can't ask and that you might get some kind of retaliation or something might happen, then maybe it is time for you to move on. I will say one thing with that, however, is that if you are someone that kind of keeps those things to yourself and bottles them up inside, that's going to carry you onto your next job. So if you don't take care of yourself it doesn't matter if you leave the job now, it's going to carry over. That same trait in yourself is going to carry on over to the next job. You're not speaking up. If you don't feel like you have that communication, that you can talk to your supervisor, if there's some kind of problem, you need to ask yourself, is it me? Am I just someone that's not someone who speaks up? Do I have a problem with that? Am I a poor communicator? So you need to ask yourself that question and ask yourself how you can improve upon that. And you need to be aware of that, because that's something that you may need to get over and not worry so much about what the reaction from whoever you tell, your manager or supervisor. Don't worry so much about their reaction. You just need to say it in a very assertive, confident way with backing up with numbers. And I think most people, most managers, supervisors respect numbers. And so if they, you got to remember that managers, they're managing a lot of different people. And so they may not necessarily be focusing on what your problem is. So if you don't tell them what you're wanting or what you're expecting or what you're needing, sometimes they won't know and they can't do anything with it. And you've told them several things and nothing's changing, it might be time to move on. If you start noticing that you're getting more irritable with coworkers and patients, it's time for you to figure out what you need to do differently, because if there's something in your own life that needs to be fixed, then you need to fix it, because that's just not something your personal life, a lot of times our job and our personal life can kind of intertwine. I mean, obviously what you're making, the time you're spending, and how those two things with your work and your family life are interchanging. If you're getting home late, the work that you take home, those are things that can definitely impede on our home life and our family life and make us very unhappy. So I definitely think that one of the things that's super important is that if you start noticing that and within yourself, to ask yourself, is it time for a change for me? If you're at a job where you're starting to notice some of these signs and symptoms that I mentioned, it might be time to ask yourself some of these questions. Is it something that you can change? Is it you? Do you need to ask for more? Do you need to set limits? And I hope this inspires you to really ask yourself the questions and make sure that you are doing a little soul searching, because being unhappy at your job, you don't want that. You honestly don't want that. It carries over into your life. And I'm a big believer that, sometimes we have to do things that we don't want to do, but I think if it's time to move on and it's time to grow, you're doing best for your patients, for the facility, for yourself, for your family. I really think that you just have to sometimes take that leap and realize that it may be the best thing that you can do to say that it's time for me to move on and grow. Well, that's it, everybody. Subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you guys so much. Every time we get a new subscriber, I cannot tell you how much that means to us. So, stay tuned for more, guys.